Hello everybody, how's it going? Ben Gothard here with another Project Egg interview, and today we are talking to the magnificent Dan Doty from South Dakota. How you doing today, Dan?
Thanks, man. No, I don't want to challenge you right away, but North Dakota. I was born in North Dakota.
Oh, North Dakota.
That's where I grew up. I live in Montana.
Okay, well, thank you for correcting me. That was totally my fault. But yeah, so Dan and I met not too long ago over in Nashville, and we hit it off, and Dan's doing some really incredible things, so I wanted to bring him on the show so he could share with you guys everything that he's doing and really talk about his life. And I think it's going to be incredible. So let's jump right in. Dan, first question for you. What is your story?
What is my story? So I was born in a little town in North Dakota, and my young life was really weird. I mean, weird. And not weird because there was weird stuff going on. It was weird because there just wasn't much going on. Like North Dakota, in the agricultural section of it, there's a lot of these little towns in the middle of nowhere, very disconnected, very cold, very flat, right? Like geographically, physically flat, like a pancake. Lots of snow and cold, lots of months of the year where you're just at home, or like being shuttled to, I don't know, whatever activity or whatever it is. And culturally pretty buttoned up, I would say, pretty closed off. And that said, it was an amazing childhood, just like loving family, loving parents, but grew up in this weird place. And, I was a pretty sensitive kid in the sense that I could really feel a lot. I could feel what other people were feeling. I felt things really deeply. And I didn't have much room or outlet for expression, right? And so I'll skip forward, and like in high school I was a kind of a jock, but I was also a metalhead and partied a lot, and went to college and started actually traveling abroad during college, which just changed my life drastically, like overwhelmingly. Spent a bunch of time abroad. And then right after college, I started working as a wilderness therapy guide. So I worked for these programs where I went out and led groups of young men, usually 13 to 20-ish years old, who were struggling in life, who were having a hard time, and whose families and parents and communities, some of these were actual correctional programs, so they were arrested. And then a lot of them were private pay therapeutic services, right? Where, Johnny's in trouble, we got to send him out for a sort of corrective experience, right? And I found myself in that work and in those places. I found myself just really naturally finding a good role for me as a mentor, as like an older brother figure, as somebody who could really understand these guys and really be there for them, really help them open up and grow. And at the same time, I was doing it myself. I was growing. I was learning. I think one of the cool things about this job and this career was that it literally actually gave me books of knowledge on how to communicate better, how to be more clear with my emotions. And I needed to be able to do this in order to work with others in that capacity, right? And I also love the wilderness and nature more than anything ever at any point in the universe. Like, that is my place. It's where I fit. So it was just this amazing experience that set a course for me, right? And I became obsessed with a couple things, the wilderness being one, but the other being manhood, masculinity, rites of passage, like what it is or what it was that men and boys need in order to mature and grow up and be healthy and be happy and fulfilled, have good relationships to get what we want, have good careers, and I felt like I could see through a lot of BS, right? And one of the most important things was on these trips, almost all of them included a parent week or a father-son trip or part of it. And I would see these kids reconnect with their dads in a way that maybe they never had before. It was just so powerful. Like, I just felt like we have so many layers between us, and we're very rarely actually making contact with each other. And this work allowed me to do that. And it, fast forwarding, I did that for a long time. I became a teacher in the Bronx for a while, kind of continued my learning and my work. I then had a career in media where I started out on the bottom of the food chain, but worked my way up to direct and produce a show called Meat Eater. I created a show, helped create a show called Apex Predator, produced and directed it, and then I became executive producer. And then a couple years ago, I let that go. I had my own son, and then I really went full into my dream, and I launched a company called Evryman last year. And we do wilderness expeditions, we do weekend retreats, and we help men organize their own men's groups in their own communities. And it's all based on the same stuff. Like, let's get rid of all of this extra gunk around us, and let's actually sit down and be real with each other. So that's pretty quick. I'm pretty impressed how fast that went. But that's a long story. That's
an amazing story. So, I wanna really take a step back and I want to dig a little bit deeper into your past. So, you said from the beginning you were kind of in a weird place where there really wasn't much to do. How do you think that sort of environment crafted you? Like how do you think that played a role in who you are today?
I love that question because it's really clear to me that there was actually, I'm really grateful for this. There was not a lack, but there was a limit on the external stimulation that I had as a kid, right? So, there wasn't that much noise. There wasn't flashing lights. It was a quieter life, right? And we didn't travel much when I was young. We kind of stayed pretty home and local, right? I think I saw the ocean for the first time when I was 16 or 17. The first time I saw actual mountains was maybe I was 14, something like that. So I wasn't widely traveled. And here's how it shaped me. One of the ways, there's a lot of ways, but when I got to places where there was more life and there was more action and there was more contrast, it was just like the biggest party was thrown and was being thrown everywhere I went. Like to go from a flat landscape and drive across the plains and see the Rocky Mountains, it's like, oh my gosh, like this is incredible, and to see the ocean for the first time. And I mean so like I said, I started traveling abroad. So I went to Europe. I was like, can I swear? I'll try not to swear. Yeah, holy crap, man. Like the food and the people and the culture and the music and the opportunities and the difference and the liveliness, just incredible. I didn't go to New York for the first time in my life till I think I was 24 or 25. Same thing, man. I got off there and got in the subway and just saw all the people around me, and it just lit me up, just lit me up to no end. So I don't know. I'd be really curious to hear if there's any other Midwesterners or sort of folks that have had anything similar, but I think that's pretty real for me, that it really it's made the world really interesting, I guess,
Yeah, that's really cool. And that's a really cool perspective that you have, coming from where you did come from and now, kind of immersing yourself in all these different cultures. That's really interesting. So, I want to talk about the sensitivity, because that's something that you mentioned very early on, was that you were kind of a sensitive child. Again, how has that really impacted your life moving forward, and how did you identify that as one of your key characteristics?
Great. Yeah, really good question. Again, so how did I identify it when I was young, or how do I Yeah. Well, it's funny. So my wife recently asked my little brother, who lives here in Montana with us, what I was like as a little kid. And this surprised me, but my brother said fragile. Like I was fragile. I would have never thought about that word about myself. I would have probably never used that, but I think there's some truth in it. I really, really was just almost dominated by the interactions between my parents in some ways. Like my dad's mood or my mom's state of being or the relationship between them. I was hyper aware of it. As I imagine many children are. I mean, because there's something about safety and security, wrapped up in that. I also know that, well, this is an embarrassing story, but I was like 5, maybe 6. And we were driving in my dad's friend's truck across a bridge over the Red River. And I was just flipping the lock up and down on the car door. And I think he just very kindly asked me to stop doing it because it was annoying him. I just burst into tears. Like I just cried and cried. And I don't know, I was a bookworm. I loved to read. I think where I began to recognize it more clearly. So when I was about 7 or 8, I started martial arts, Taekwondo, for a good long time, like 7, 8 years, and took it very seriously. And through that, I think it toughened me up, not in a bad way, not in like a harmful way, but really in a very positive way. I started to get more feedback from people from outside my family and my friends. And I think that the sort of the values of Taekwondo, courtesy, integrity, perseverance, respect, all of these things became really important to me. And yeah, it gave me a lot of confidence too. So I think pre martial arts, I was, probably fragile. And during and post, it gave me just a real sense of self, a sense of confidence, a sense of ability to take things on. And I really credit my Taekwondo instructor for really helping to cultivate that. I turned into I would say a little bit of a badass, internally. I'm like, I could, I was like I think I got my black belt when I was 12, and I was on a team where we drive around and demonstrate, and I would lead classes of like dozens, if not hundreds of people at times. It was like it was a big deal. It was a pretty big deal for me. So.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So what you're saying is, don't get on your bad side. Did you open up a can of whoop ass?
I was 15 or 16 when I quit, so I am not. You could definitely beat me up if you really wanted to. So I'm not a brawler in any sense. But.
All right, so let's talk a little bit about the outlet, and because you said from an early age you didn't really have an outlet. Maybe it was a creative outlet. Whatever that was, can you talk about the importance of having that outlet and how you really developed that over time and how it manifested itself for you?
Yeah, great. So I do think that martial arts was probably my first outlet. It's where I really was able to express myself and be myself through that lens, and I think it trained me in a lot of ways. But when I mean outlet, I guess at the bottom of it, what I mean is being able to communicate one's truth or state of being or actual experience, to be able to fully and relax in a relaxed way, just express what's real and what's up, right? And I mean, another thing that was really big for me too was there also wasn't a ton of like touch physicality in my home or life either. And I ended up dating this girl in high school that I almost credit her with not saving my life, but just augmenting my life greatly. She came from a family that was very warm, lots of hugs going on, and just so great with expression, right? Just easy to say, things like I love you and I care about you, and emotions were very fluid and fluent in that home. And I spent a lot of time with her. And that was a real opening for me too. Just a real human opening, where, and it felt so good, and it helped me relax a lot, I think, just as a person, because and I didn't know this at the time necessarily. And, but yeah, it helped me be a little bit more human, or a little bit more full in who I was. And that's the direction that, that I really care to go, right? It'd be more and more human, I guess, to put it simply.
Wow, that's really powerful. So, I want to talk about your traveling abroad experiences, because you seem to be very excited about it, and we talked about it a little bit. You said you went to New York around 24, 25, I believe, and you were going different places. But can you talk about all the places that you did go, and some of the real big takeaways from your travels?
Oh, yeah. The first one was I spent my sophomore year of college in England on a study abroad program. That same girl I talked about from high school, we went to college together too, and she came back from class on a day on our freshman year, and she's like, "I'm gonna go to England next year, and if you want to be my boyfriend, you should probably come too." And she just kind of put it up there, and I'm like, "Okay, I'll go." But what I learned there was I wouldn't even say learned, but what I experienced was this massive expansion that I was talking about, that holy cow, the world is not any one way. Like the world is not any 1,000 ways. It's not even 1,000,000 ways. Like, the world is so big and so wild. And, I just traveled my butt off, It was the age of discovery for me, exploration in a sense. I traveled all over Europe. Spent months living out of a backpack, just learned and soaked it up, and drank bad white wine on the Greek islands, and climbed mountains in Switzerland. Just had a freaking blast, man. And I came back with very, very different ambitions than when I left. I think that my ambitions when I was younger were not non-existent, but almost non-existent. I just didn't have I didn't see a whole lot to be excited about, honestly. I came back from Europe being like, oh boy, things are different, things are different now. So that was the first major one. A year after that, or 2 years after that, I went on an anthropological field study to Ecuador, and I think it was about a 5-week trip. I think it was 5 weeks, 4 weeks. And we spent some time living with 3 different indigenous groups in both the highlands and the lowlands of Ecuador. And that was another just brain exploder. And that set me up for a whole different set of growth. And that growth and direction included spirituality. At that time, so we sat in an ayahuasca ceremony with a local shaman. We didn't drink ayahuasca, but we just sat with him as he did a ceremony. That was the beginning of a whole new direction for me. Like, oh my, what the heck, And what that also got me in touch with is something that's very important to me now, and I've studied and practiced a lot, is this idea of embodiment, and this idea of being at home in our physical world, being at home in our physical bodies, being in touch with the world and our surroundings. And there was something I recognized, and I didn't have the words for it right away, but going down there and being immersed in an indigenous culture, they moved different. Like, just something qualitatively felt different about these people. And I didn't know exactly what it was, but looking back, their life that's just so connected with physicality, life and death, and the elements and the ground and fire and water, like just everything, right? Just like not at a distance from life, right? They don't, like, they're in life, not looking at it. And that really just, man, did that set up a whole bunch of long-term passions, excitements, directions, practices, all of that. Yeah. Man, I'm glad you asked that question. I haven't really had a chance to reflect on some of that travel in a while, and it's really cool to do so. So
well, it's cool to listen to you reflect on it too. I mean, that's very, very interesting and very profound, I think.
So just a little more. So right after college, I moved to Ecuador to study Spanish, and I lived there for about 5 months, and I wrote my first novel there. It's not published. Don't go looking for it. It's not out there. But I wrote a book, and moved to Panama with my ex-girlfriend for a while, and did some more travel. And I went to Southeast Asia, I did a big trip to the Philippines and to where else did I go? Thailand. And at that point in my life, I thought that a life abroad was the life for me. Like I really fully expected to be living abroad the rest of my life, or at least be. So I think at this time I projected myself as maybe an anthropologist or some sort of culture. I was looking into ethnomusicology to study the music of different cultures, things like that. Yeah, and then I landed in. I was in Panama, living in Panama. Needed to come back to the States to get a job and earn some money, and I found my first wilderness therapy job. And then I started a whole new line of exploration, which had to do with the wilderness.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So, when you did come back from your travels abroad, did you already know that the wilderness was such a big, important aspect of your life, or did you really discover it once you started that journey? And how has that really played an impact in your life?
I did know. I discovered it when I was 12 or 13, and my cousin from Lemoore, North Dakota, Eric, invited me to go on his summer youth trip to the Boundary Waters Wilderness Canoe area in northern Minnesota. And I went on I think it was an 7-day canoeing trip backcountry in the wilderness area. And yeah, I joke that on that trip I fell in love with my two biggest loves of my life, which are the wilderness and the outdoors and ladies. So I think I had my first major crush on a girl on that trip. And yeah, I came away from that trip knowing that, well, you know what it was? Not even knowing at that point, but feeling so free and at home and just filled with literal joy being out there in the woods. I mean, just like pure joy. And I still feel that. That's the thing. My favorite thing is like long or multi-day backcountry trips. Like that's my thing. That's what fills me up. And so I did know. And I had worked a couple summers as a kind of like a trail guide and a trail worker for both the Forest Service and the Fish and Wildlife Service. So I definitely had, the outdoor passion, not so much in a recreational way. It's not like I was, a crazy climber or a crazy, whatever, skier or whatever, but I knew I loved to be outside for sure.
That's awesome.
And my current biggest dream in life is to be on the show Alone on the History Channel, where you go out for as long as you can and survive by yourself. That's like actually my biggest dream right now.
That would be so cool. So, I want to talk a little bit about, I want to talk a lot about what you're doing with Evryman right now. So can you talk a little bit about, and really dive deep on how it got started, the kind of key players involved, and really what's going on with that whole organization?
Awesome. Yeah. So I'll back up a little bit because it's important. But when I was 27, I'm 35 now. When I was 27, I sat in my first men's group in New York City. I had been a teacher, as I had mentioned, had been teaching in the city. And I didn't know what a men's group was. And I was invited, and I went, and it changed my life. Another one of these big turning moments, moments of reckoning and change for me. And so I found in my first men's group, and I basically found one everywhere I went since that point. And then I started creating them everywhere I went. And, what it offered me, and it still holds true today, is that same exact opportunity to let go of all of the cultural trappings, interpersonal dialogue, the need to look a certain way, and just show up and have people to see you for who you actually are, right? And so Evryman was planted in my head then, for sure, in some way or another. And I knew that was, I had something in me in that direction that needed to happen, right? And I actually started at that point when in my late 20s, I started a blog, I started writing about men's stuff and all that. And it just didn't, actually almost got there. Like I almost sold a book about it and things like that. at that point, I was focusing more on adolescents, right? I was working with boys more than men. But then I got into my TV career. And then so Everyman literally percolated in me for years, and a lot of times uncomfortably percolated. As I went through my career in media, I felt this nagging, biting feeling of like, what about this? What about this? Like, dude, what are you doing with this, right? And so a year and a half ago, my son was born, and I got fired from my job. And those were, a kick to get me off my butt, and then one to get me out the door, basically. And a good dear friend of mine, his name is Sasha Lewis. He's the founding partner with me in Everyman. And then Lucas Crump, who's become a dear friend, is our third partner and co-founder now. So we launched a year ago. It's 2018 right now. We launched officially in January 2017, and then really got off the ground with I was on Joe Rogan's podcast last April, and that gave us like a huge infusion of attention and energy that really lifted us into existence. So in the last year, we've run 5 sold out retreats, our first wilderness expedition, Yellowstone National Park. We have what I think between 60 and 70 men's groups meeting regularly across the country, and a couple places outside of the country already. And yeah, we're still young and scrappy. We're still a startup. We're working hard. I have a coaching practice too, so I work with guys one-on-one, which is really fulfilling for me. And this all launched about 8 months ago, last April, 9 months ago. So yeah, that's the birth story. That's Everyman birth story.
That's awesome. So, what is the purpose of everything? Where do you see your organization, your business, your movement almost going, and what's really the biggest goal for that?
Yeah, great. So it's that the world is literally asking and needing something different from men right now. I think that's a pretty loud call, through men are. So I'm going to start with the extreme examples. We're hurting other people. Different things like the Me Too movement demonstrate that. We're also hurting ourselves pretty badly. Our suicide rate keeps growing. It's pretty crazy if you actually look at it. The male suicide rate in this country. And then so that's the extreme level, but there's 100 or 1,000 more minute levels and more subtle levels than that, from just men feeling stuck in their job and men not having friends, feeling lonely, not being able to communicate well, not knowing how to do relationships well. The list goes on and on. So I want to just park that for a second. There's this current reality of men, and obviously there's a lot of great stuff too, right? Like, it's not all bad. But what Everyman is here for is to not only change the conversation and say that, hey guys, we need to do something different. We actually have a way to do things differently, and we're sharing and teaching and training and practicing pure, straight up humanity through vulnerability, through compassion, and not just the ideas of these things, but the actual practice of being present, the actual practice of saying things that are scary to say, the practice of having hard conversations, the practice of, which is, in reality, that's the practice of being honest, right? Like, hard conversations happen when you take the risk to be honest. And so that is our fundamental goal. We believe that if men can grow up in these ways, we can affect change honestly, at a pretty highly ambitious level. We feel like we can, if we could seed this into our culture, that men can be vulnerable, men can be real. We don't have to put on a front. We don't have to do things alone, and we can come together and actually practice this together. I think we can change the world.
Wow, that's incredible. And I totally agree with you, by the way. I very much admire all the things that you're doing. So, for all the men that are listening, and for the ladies, maybe you could tell a special man in your life about this. Can we give like an actionable something to do right now to help us be more present and kind of toss the facade out the window? What's something we can do right now?
Yeah, totally. So right now, literally, take your awareness from your head and like sink it down to your body. And what do you notice? See what you can notice. And I'll just demonstrate. So right now, my feet feel alive and cold. I feel a pinch in my chest, right in the middle. I feel a little warm in the face, and some dryness around my mouth. So that I'm just describing to you my physical reality right now, what I notice, right, what I feel. And then emotionally, I'm feeling very open. I'm feeling curious. I'm feeling love. I'm not feeling angry. I'm not feeling sad. I'm feeling really warm and open right now. So that right there, what I just did is me expressing my current reality to you, right? Nothing more, nothing less. Now, the strange thing is that's really not what most guys do at most time. Mostly what we're doing is telling you what we think. We're projecting something in the future. We're projecting something into the past. We're not right here. So that is a simple practice, and I'm not suggesting you go do that all day everywhere where you go. You just do that over and over, but it's an awareness practice, right? It's a practice of being aware of of your state, right? And then when you're doing that, you start to become more comfortable with your state, right? So there's a lot of states we don't want to feel. We don't want to feel extreme emotion. We probably don't want to feel much discomfort. And natural. This is natural being a human. But, just like going to the gym and working out your muscles, it's uncomfortable, right? But it's for a good purpose. It's literally a workout. It helps you get healthier and stronger. And so it's an emotional workout to be able to sit in and be with what you feel. And the reason that this is so important is that because other people are feeling things all around you too. And when they're feeling something that you can't deal with, you're not going to be there for them because you just, it's how our social wiring works, right? It's how, like, there's a whole level of our brain that is all about sensing and feeling our relationship to those around us in our community, right? And the neuroscience around this stuff is really incredible. And one of the most simple and straightforward things is just the ability to name emotional states. It takes their power away, and it really turns down their volume enough so that you can say, oh yeah, I'm angry, and then you just keep with your life. And so what this is, I know this is a long answer, but it is the opposite of repression, right? It's the opposite of stuffing things down. And I'm talking about, you can stuff down something big, or you can stuff down 100 little things every day. And guess what? That's a big pile of gunk, It's a big pile of garbage that's all of a sudden stopping up the flow of, honestly, your energy, your normal ability to be who you are. So.
Wow, that was powerful. And as we were kind of going through that original exercise, I was kind of doing that with you too, and it was cool. It kind of almost felt more centered and here in the moment, which I'm very grateful for. So thank you for sharing that. So that was really cool. So I would challenge everybody to really take a second and go through that. It was cool. So that got me thinking a little bit more about this kind of thing. So as men, as we're progressing, we're going about our day-to-day lives, are there some regular maintenance things, if you will, that we should be doing, and what are those things, and how can we really incorporate them into our day-to-day life?
Yeah, awesome. So, I would highly recommend to any human on the planet to inquire or be curious about a meditation practice or some basic awareness practice where you can take the time to slow down each day in some capacity, right? And it doesn't have to be a lot. It could literally be 3 minutes a day to start, something like that. I really am a deep believer that the amount of information we take in today is so far past the norm for our human, existence in an evolutionary sense. Like, it's crazy, man. Like, all the information we take in constantly. And I believe it's incredibly powerful to create a little gap for yourself so you can catch up with yourself, right? Like, I don't know, man. I'm still probably subconsciously processing something from our conversation with my family last night at the dinner table, like, and I've had a regular meditation practice for about 7 or 8 years, and it has, it's literally been, the actual feeling for me is, I don't know, I think about wearing the most comfortable clothes that I own, and sitting on, like, in the most comfortable environment, and just that sense of being home, that sense of like something is just deeply good and right. And I know it's not true for everybody. Meditation can be really hard. So anyway, I think that's really helpful and really important. I would go a little further and say that a meditation practice that involves the body itself, so like the actual physical body, is another thing to be curious about, because a lot of meditation is oriented for your brain. You're really just sort of trying to quiet the mind. And there's a lot of ways to do that, but the type of meditation that I practice is a somatic meditation. It's so using the ability to feel your physical body as the thing to concentrate on, as the actual thing that helps you quiet your mind, right? So that might be just breathing into my belly for a while, or running through like a body scan where you start with parts of your body and really just feel, right? And so that's my practice, and that's I think very, very powerful. Other things would be some sort of relational space. So whether that's a therapist or a coach or a men's group, or it could even be a friend, but a friend with whom you in advance you agree that, hey, let's create a space and a time here where we can, cut the shit in a sense, and really really be real and really be honest, and have a place to share the stuff that you're holding in. So, I obviously have my preferences in those. Like, I have I have a men's group, and I have a coach too, and have had coaches and therapists, and I actually use all of these things. But I think that if we're living without any place to consciously go there, it's really hard to manage it all. Life's a lot, Life is a kind of a bear, There's a lot going on. So,
wow, that's incredible. So, you mentioned that you have a coach.
Yeah.
And that's really interesting to me, because it seems like you are a coach for a lot of people, and a source of knowledge and inspiration, and really a provider for other people. So what do you, in that position, look for in a coach? Like, what do you look for when you're trying to find guidance?
Great question. And actually, I'll just to amend what I said. I don't officially have a coach right now, but I have a mentor. I have a mentor that I talk to every week, and we do regular calls. And I have like employed coaches in the past, and therapists too. But to be totally frank, I think here's the baseline for myself. I need to keep my one of my other mentors, Foster Mobley, has a book. Can't remember the name of it right now, but he has this vision of a creek, right? And our life is this creek, and if we don't address things, if we don't sort of take things head on, branches fall in, rocks fall in, and things get dammed up, right? And in my position where I am coaching others, and I am mentoring others and helping others, and being in this position, if I don't take care of myself, if I don't keep my creek flowing, if I don't keep, and I can't do it all on my own, there's just no way, right? Then I'm not going to be able to serve others nearly as effectively as I can if I'm clean, clear, moving forward. And that doesn't mean that, things aren't dramatic or difficult. They are, right? That's just, I'm not, like, I need to make sure that I don't get so stuck that it puts me, like, I can't afford to be in like a shutdown place right now. And it's not just professionally. Like, I have a little boy, I have a family, I have a wife, I have, so many things that are, in a sense, reliant, but not even just that, but in relation to me that I care about. And so, and I think there's something about it too, that once you, at least for me, once I had somebody there to help with things, and I recognize the value of that, it's just so, it's hard to go without at times. I can at times, and things are good, but there is, so for example, right now, I am actually looking for probably a therapist at this point, just to help me with a specific area of my life that some old, stuff that's still there that I would like to, I don't know, get through and heal or relax or whatever that is. So the real answer is it depends on the time, where I'm at and what I'm looking for. I think that for me, having men in these roles has been very important. And then at other times, it's actually been incredibly important for me to have women in those roles too, because, I just naturally relate differently. If I related different to my dad and my mom, right? And that set a tone in a way. So.
Wow. That's really powerful. So, I want to talk a little bit about the business side of Evryman, because I think that it's really interesting to talk about the mission and the vision and really what the good that you're trying to accomplish, but also talk about technically on the business side how you're going to accomplish that. So can you talk a little bit about what steps you've taken to grow your business and what has been those biggest driving factors? You mentioned the podcast. Maybe you could talk about some other really big parts.
Yeah. So we haven't monetized the podcast yet. We're probably close to the growth to make that a possibility. But our initial stage was just to do some retreats, right? To do these in-person events. And we do weekends of up to 50 guys at a time. And, the price point for that is between $700 and $1,000. And we do the wilderness trips, which are week long, and the price point for that is more like $4,500. So that's been enough to, along with an initial small investment from one of the partners, that's been enough to basically float us to this point. It keeps. Nobody's full time, nobody's full time yet. I'm the closest, but I also have a coaching practice too, which keeps me from being full time. But what the vision is, and what we're about to unroll this year fairly soon, is a straightforward membership model where we have a lot. What we're looking to do is create a really large scale community of men that are like in and committed to this. And we have a lot of different entry points for them. So with a membership will come first, simple, kind of straightforward access to a private Facebook group where we can all communicate and commiserate and all of that. It'll give access to starting or joining one of our in-person groups, which are really, honestly, kind of the bedrock of what we do, or it's at least what we see as one of our biggest gifts being. It's also a kind of a messy process, and like creating a men's group is kind of like creating a romantic relationship where it takes commitment, it takes energy, it takes a lot of stuff. So we don't see that, at least at this point, we don't see that as our core business. It would be tricky to hang our business on that just because it takes a lot. But that, along with the membership, I've been spending the last month creating the first sort of quarter's worth of every Sunday night. We're going to send out a package of educational materials, and there's going to be a theme for the week tied into a larger calendar of thematic content. And it's going to be really specific. We're going to isolate a theme and a couple skills each week. Like, getting in, like, how do you sit with anger as an example, right? How do you express anger in a healthy way that doesn't hurt others? Maybe that's a week's topic. And we're going to have a practice guide, which says, here's how you practice it in your group. If you're in a group, here's some prompts, here's some exercises, here's how you can practice it there. If you're not in a group yet, here's how you practice it in your life. Here's some ways to engage with this. It might be some journaling, it might be some conversations to have. And then there's also going to be a private podcast recording that's not open to the public. And I'm missing something. Early access to our events and things like that. So that's our big push that we're working on, and we're going to be launching it within the first quarter of this year for sure. That's actually coming up pretty quick. So we're going to be launching it sometime soon, and we're not holding it too tightly. We're really willing in the big picture. We would love to partner with brands like wellness brands, health brands. One way that we sort of look at ourselves, and we haven't really unfurled this language, but as the heart of men's health, that we see our community as a place of accountability, and it's kind of like the missing link. Like if you want to grow, get healthy, like expand, whatever that looks like, that maybe that's your physical health, you need to get better. Maybe that's your mental health. Maybe that's your financial health. Maybe any of this stuff. We're seeing us as a community that's just there to support you, and we'd love to have partnerships with other brands that make sense in that way. So
that's awesome. That's awesome. That's really cool. So we talked a lot about your past, and we talked a little bit about your present, but I wanna drill down a little bit more. What would you say is your biggest focus as of right
now? Creating and supporting our groups, the men who have been and are creating groups. So we're creating a mentoring network internally so that every man who starts one of our groups has somebody to go to and talk to on a regular basis, has like a direct line to somebody with a lot of experience who can really answer questions and troubleshoot and things like that. So that's taking a lot of it. The second part is, and really my overall direction and hope for my role in all this is to share, right? So I'm starting to write articles for publications that have a bigger reach, and I'm looking and inquiring to get on more podcasts like this one, and to get ourselves out in the world. I'm working on a book proposal or two actually, and so I'd say it's about 50-50 split, and I think that I am looking to be more and more in that second category as we go forward. I want to write. What I really want to do is write books and talk and teach and share and just be out in the world meeting people. And that said, like this last year of my life has been the most fulfilling, like by far. Like every day, my life is I get to connect with guys, right? And in a positive way, in a way that's good for them and good for me and good for the world. And it's pretty damn fulfilling, man. It's wild.
That's awesome. So Dan, I wanna thank you so much for coming on the show and for sharing everything that you have. It really means a lot to me. I do have one more question for you.
Please.
Is there anything about yourself that you think is an important part of who you are that I did not ask you about today? In other words, what did I miss?
What did you miss? Well, yeah, there's an artist part of me that I've written fiction most of my life, and a musician. I used to play in bands a lot, and I used to have this fight between who I was gonna be. Was I gonna be this wild artist guy, or was I going to do this man thing, right? And I feel like for the most part they've converged. And I'm using my creativity and all of that for this purpose now. But there still is that part of me that I would love to take my family and move to a little town in the mountains of Chile and write a book and like be weird, you know.
That's awesome. That's fantastic. Yeah. So again, Dan, I want to thank you so much for coming on the show. So for people that want to get more involved, they're really fired up right now. How do they take the next step? How do they get in contact with you? What's the next step for people?
Yeah, cool. Everything's at the Evryman website, which is evryman.co, and we spell Evryman without the second E, so EVRYMAN.co. You can find all of our retreats. If somebody's really intrigued, you can see if there's a group in your area that you can go check out. There's also a handful of events and retreats coming up. So we got them on the East Coast and the West Coast. And then we have our wilderness expedition that we just released it'll be in June in Montana. Or just listen to the podcast. I think that's a good way in. The Evryman Podcast, it's everywhere. You can find it. Just check it out. And if it's for you, then you can take a step after that.
Awesome. Well, I highly encourage everybody to go check out the website and the podcast. I'm going to include links to all of those things in the show notes, so take a peek at that. Dan, again, I want to thank you so much for coming on the show. It's been an absolute pleasure. Hope you've had a blast as well. And to everybody who is listening, I want to thank you so much. Y'all are the reason that we do this, and I love you guys. So with that being said, this has been another Project Egg interview. We've been talking to Dan Doty from North Dakota. How's it going?